The Jason Strain, Chapter 15. A.K. Henro was searching the pockets of the dirty pants worn by the so-called special guest. Only the machete, but that was more than enough. This dumbass game was turning out to be real kindergarten shit, a cakewalk. If this big dumb fuck in a goofy Halloween costume was the best they could do, Henro had this game in his pocket. He had been psyching himself up all day, wrestling the fear and the doubt, and since he was on this island, he felt nothing but a kind of hot excitement. Killing really was like riding a bicycle. It was going to be easy pickings. He thought he heard something, some stealthy crackle of leaves. He cocked his head, switching the machete to his good right hand, when another huge guy in a hockey mask appeared in the clearing. Henro rolled his eyes. Another one? He spat on the ground. Shit, ain't you guys a bit old to be letting your mama dress you alike? Jason Voorhees cocked his head as if trying to fathom Henro's words. You want some of what I gave your late brother over here? Henro asked. Come and get it, motherfucker. Jason took a step forward. Henro ran at him, raising the machete and bringing it down into the masked killer's forehead. The machete shattered the white hockey mask and stuck firmly in the bony curve of the man's skull. The pieces of the mask fell to the ground, and Henro backed away, his eyes wide in disbelieving terror. This was no ordinary man. The face revealed beneath the shattered mask was hideously deformed, rotten and twisted with a ragged scar. Dark, unhealthy blood seemed to ooze from every pore, drooling from his twisted lips and falling like tears from his single good eye. Worse, the machete planted in his head seemed to have no effect whatsoever. He just reached up and yanked it free, releasing a sluggish trickle of gray ooze that coated the blade. Jason's single eye burned with toxic fury. Henro wanted to scream, to run, to put as much mileage as possible between him and that impossible monster. But he was frozen, paralyzed with terror, as the machete came down like the end of the world. His last thought was a kind of nauseous shame. Shame that he hadn't fought harder, that he'd disgraced his set, that he'd lost. He had lost. It was over, as a huge blade bisected his nose and lips, filling up his world with unendurable pain. Something happened to Henro. He felt a weird skittering feeling like ants crawling over the surface of his brain, and his limbs shook, racked with seizures so brutal. He felt as if his spine would snap. The shame, the pain, everything was suddenly swallowed up by the most intense raw anger, bloody and mindless and underscored by an almost maddening kind of hunger. Jason pulled the machete free from the young man's face and watched curiously as he wrenched and flailed in the dirt. Henro's body then leapt to its feet, eyes expanding dramatically in their sockets like bloody bread dough. The bloated, bleeding eyes fixed on Jason, holding his gaze for a split second, and then, almost as if he recognized some kind of fundamental commonality, the man did not attack. Instead, he turned and tore off through the bush. Jason did not contemplate the meaning of this exchange any more than he had considered the apparent resurrection of the doctors on the submarine. Instead, he knelt down and took the whole and unharmed mask from the ground beside the other. He put the mask on, hefted the bloody machete, and headed away into the jungle. And that's credits, Alan said. For the first time in his career, he was actually nervous. He was sweating, thick, salty drops running down from his thinning hairline to sting his eyes and blur his vision. He did not even know what to make of what he had seen, but they could not have asked for a better cliffhanger. The website was receiving thousands of hits, chat rooms exploding with speculation. The appearance of the white-suited undead, then the apparent reanimation of Henro, was it real? Some kind of elaborate hoax? Extreme Elimination could not have paid for such publicity. But something about what he had just witnessed made Alan's blood run cold. It looked to him as if the banger had been as good as dead, stone dead, machete in the face deader than dog shit dead. How could he have got back up like that? And his eyes, his awful, bulging, manic eyes, had disturbed Alan so deeply that he was overwhelmed with the sudden urge to walk out of the cockpit and never look back. Instead, he called Caleb. "Boss," Alan said. You want the good news or the bad news? So, Butch said, watching Alex as she adjusted her shirt again, attempting to cover herself with the shreds of bloody fabric. Have you got a plan? She looked back at him. No. They have to stop the game, Butch said. Something's wrong. What makes you think it's not all part of the game? Alex asked. Remember, they said there would be no outside help no matter what. Yeah, but those frogmen, Butch said. They weren't part of the game. I'm sure of it. What do you think was wrong with the people in the white suits? Alex asked. It's like whatever is wrong with the guy in the hockey mask is wrong with them too. I don't know, Butch said. Listen, thanks for helping me, saving me, everything. I mean, that's not why I fucked you. She looked away, shy and anxious. We could die. I never really believed it before, but I do now. She paused again, and he could see how hard this was for her, so he said nothing. I really want you to protect me, she said, to make decisions and be strong and tough so I don't have to. But I can't let that happen. I made myself a promise that I would never let that happen again. The passionate determination in her jaw and her narrow green eyes made her so fiercely beautiful, it hurt Butch to look at her face. But Alex, Butch said, everything else aside, you got to understand that I'm no hero. I don't want to help you, to save you and protect you like some macho knight in shining armor. Don't you see? I need you to help me. I can't do this alone. We have to help each other, or neither one of us is going to make it. She looked at him like he was trying to determine if he was pulling her leg or scamming her somehow. Without you, I'd be dead, or else I'd still be shulking around the jungle, getting eaten alive by chiggers and waiting to be ambushed by that scary hillbilly broad or something. I mean, look at you, Butch continued. You're no damsel in distress. You've got a hell of a stiff left. You could probably kick my ass with the shape I'm in right now. Wait, do you hear something? Alex asked, cocking her head. Butch listened and heard a faint rustling and a kind of thick, wet noise that sounded like someone eating. I don't like it, Butch said. I can't believe I dropped that fucking frying pan, Alex said. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Shit, Butch said. Just keep quiet and move real slow. We'll see if we can check it out. They slipped as silently as possible through the tangled jungle until they spotted the dim lights, which indicated the presence of another camera. A few steps closer, and they were able to see someone hunkered down beside the camera. Who is that? Alex whispered. He's one of the contestants, isn't he? It was that buff black guy with the headband. He had his back to them, crouched over something in the thick underbrush. He turned instantly to the sound of Alex's voice, hissing, blood drooling from his chin. His nose and upper lip were hideously split open, making his face look like some kind of wet red vagina. His eyes bulged obscenely from their sockets like the men who had come out of the water. Shit, Butch said, but that was all he had time to say before the guy charged at them. Seconds later, a big, ugly white woman who was on the ground struggled to her fat, scabby knees. Slick organs spilled from her torn-open belly, and huge, wide eyes leaked blood. She stood and stumbled toward them, too. Butch and Alex ran. Tearing desperately through the vines and branches, body scraped and clawed by thorny creepers, and the ragged breath of the insane contestants inches behind them. Butch was terrified. What the fuck was happening? How could that woman be alive? Whatever had happened to the guys in the white suits had also happened to them, and that meant it could happen to Butch, or to Alex. As they hit a clear spot in the twisted foliage, there was a sudden, fearsome screech, and the crazed man flew up into the air, with the snare of woven vines clenched around one leg. Butch stumbled and half fell, legs dangling down into a loosely covered pit, as he clutched at tangled roots to prevent himself from slipping all the way in. Alex threw herself to the left to avoid the hole, but the shambling woman was not so lucky. She fell, her massive bulk crashing to the bottom of the pit. Sharpened sticks punched through her doughy, sunburnt flesh. She screamed, and blood bubbled up from her mouth and her nose as she flailed and twisted like a gaffed fish. Alex grabbed Butch's hand and helped him pull himself up in time to see a muddy figure drop down out of the tree and slash open the hanging man's throat. Copious amounts of blood spilled out, but his furious struggle did not slow at all. He continued arching his spine and flailing his arms, teeth snapping in the air as he twisted and spun. The muddy figure turned toward them, and they saw that it was female, her pale blue eyes vivid and arresting. That was all Butch could register before she lunged at him, taking 3 lightning-quick swipes with her knife. The knife was not made of metal. It was silvery pale and pearlescent in the dull glow of the camera lights. As its wicked edge slashed Butch's t-shirt, missing his skin by a hair's breadth, as he threw his elbows back and tucked in his stomach to avoid it, Butch then realized that it was a sharpened piece of shell. She pulled up and back for another swing, and Butch grabbed her arm in a top wrist lock. Her skin was slippery, but he was able to keep his grip as he forced her wrist back and pushed her to the ground. He went down with her, one knee in her face and the other in her side. Her pale eyes were wide and furious, glaring at the tip of the shell knife that was pointing down at her face. Then a sudden bolt of electricity shot through Butch's skull, and he let go of the woman's wrist and staggered back, shaken and disoriented with a horrible, nauseating sensation crawling over the surface of his skin like electric worms. The muddy woman rolled away, springing cat-like to her feet. "Stop it!" Alex yelled, throwing herself between them. "Listen to me. Fuck this stupid game. Can't you see something terrible has happened?" The muddy woman turned and looked up over her shoulder at the suspended man. His throat was cut to the bone, but he continued to struggle. In the pit, the fat woman was still twitching and squirming on the sharpened sticks. "What the hell is going on here?" the woman asked. Butch finally recognized her, the chick with the bad haircut, the blonde with the deep voice. He wondered if any of the other women were still alive. "I don't know," he said, "but whatever it is, I think it's contagious." Those sharp blue eyes fixed back on Butch. "Contagious?" Butch told her about the men who came up out of the water. "So what you're saying," the woman said, "are you saying they're like some kind of zombie?" "I have no idea," Butch said. "I'm just telling you what happened." "I'm saying we're fucked unless we find a way off this island," Alex said. "Fuck yeah," a thickly accented voice spoke up from the nearby bush. "Count me in, man." It was the wiry Mexican guy with the goatee and bad tattoos. Topless girls in sombreros and praying hands and lots of old English lettering. Several teardrops were inked below his eyes. "Beto Nunez," he said. Then he asked them, "What's the plan?" "Butch," said Butch. "This is Alex, and—" He turned away toward the muddy woman. She spat and gave the newcomer a stony glare. "Fuck you," she said. "Why don't you go hang out in the Home Depot parking lot, if you're looking for a day laborer?" "Strength in numbers," Butch said, offering a hand for the Mexican guy to shake. "Whatever's going on here is going to kill all of us if we don't work together. You speak Spanish mostly, right?" "Por supuesto," Beto said. "So if we make it to the mainland, we could definitely use someone who can speak the native language, right?" Butch said. The women nodded grudgingly. "Okay then," Butch said. "We're all beat to shit, or at least I know I am. Let's hole up and get some rest if we can. We'll try to come up with some kind of plan in the morning." "It's not safe," Alex said. "What if those things come back? Or the guy in the hockey mask?" "We can take turns keeping watch," the woman said, leaping up and catching hold of the first branch of a towering tree and hauling herself up. "Come on." Alex looked doubtfully up at the woman as she monkeyed easily up the tree. "What's your name?" Alex asked. "It's Valkyrie Randall," she said, settling into a comfortable fork. "But my friends call me Val." "Right on, Val," Beto said, grabbing the low branch and following her up the tree. "You," Val said, "you can call me Miss Randall." "It's going to be a long night," Butch said to Alex as he started up the tree after the bickering pair. Chapter 16. Dr. Michael Fraker had been working for the CCDSS in a small government-sponsored clinic in Quepos for under a month. He was still amazed, baffled, and enchanted by Costa Rica and all its curious and often contradictory glory. It was without a doubt one of the most breathtakingly beautiful places on earth, and nearly every day he experienced something totally unbelievable. On his first night there, he had been driving through pouring rain, inching along and squinting through the deluge, and he had missed the unmarked dirt road that led to the small house provided for him by the clinic. While looking for a place to turn around, he nearly hit a wet, mopey-looking creature that he had mistaken for a German shepherd until it turned its long, skinny head to peer at him with a tiny eye. It had been a giant anteater, cruising along the side of the road as if it had no idea of its own stunning improbability. When he asked his cheerful American neighbor why she hung tin pie plates over the horses' stalls in her rickety stable, she had replied in the most matter-of-fact way that the reflective plates confused the radar of the local vampire bats and kept them off her sleeping animals. Vampire bats. It was unreal. There were monkeys and toucans and crocodiles and sloths. It was like living in a zoo with no bars. Then there were the women. Dr. Fraker was 29 and more than a little geeky, tall and thin, with hunched shoulders and large feet. He had never had much luck with women back in the States, but in Costa Rica, he suddenly found himself with more female interest than he'd ever dreamed of. Tica women were friendly and totally open about sex, and they were all interested in him. He could suddenly pick and choose from a veritable smorgasbord of beautiful women. But there was really only one he was genuinely interested in. Her name was Gisela, and she worked in a tiny restaurant 2 doors down from the little clinic. The blonde American surfer types who hung around her like hungry sharks called her Juicy, and for good reason. She was a stunning, natural beauty with big hazel eyes, fringed with thick dark lashes and long, sleek chestnut hair, which brushed the upper curve of her round and saucy bottom. She, like all the other local Tica girls, seemed to subscribe to a curiously asymmetrical kind of modesty. She was often seen wearing pants sung so low that the cleavage of her spectacular ass cheeks was on display even when she stood straight upright. Yet she also wore a thick, padded bra, even with skimpy halter tops, as if showing even a hint of nipple would be totally obscene. Dave, who tended bar at Krakow, the comfortable and homey open-air bar that Dr. Fraker frequented on his days off, was the one who first pointed out this curious contradiction. "If you want to know if a girl is Tica or Teresa," the brash blonde told Dr. Fraker over ice-cold Bavaria's his first week in, "then check the headlights." Dave had nodded his head toward a gaggle of young women at the end of the bar. They all looked Latina, but one was wearing a thin Indian cotton tie-dyed blouse, and the nipples of her small high breasts were quite prominently displayed through the sheer sweaty fabric. The other girls were in tight, short skirts and tiny halters, but they all wore the same solid, weirdly unflattering white bras, as if they had got some kind of bulk discount. "Where you from, darling?" Dave asked the girl in the sheer top, placing another umbrella-frilled pink concoction on the bar in front of her. "New York," she replied. "And what about you, lovelies?" he asked the bra-wearing foursome. "Perez, Perez, Perez, si, Perez." "Did they say Paris?" Dr. Fraker asked when Dave returned smirking and triumphant. "They mean San Isidro," Dave replied. "The locals call it Perez Zeledon, or mostly Perez." "Right," Dr. Fraker said, stealing a glance back down the bar. The 2 girls on the end smiled and waved at him, and he blushed and looked down into his beer. Dr. Fraker didn't believe Dave about the bra thing at first, but the more he looked around, the more he found this to be true. Even small-breasted women wore thick padded bras all the time. He had to admit the restriction made him that much more curious. He would have given anything for a chance to see Gisela's nipples. She was never sick herself, but her grandfather, who ran one of the tour boats, was suffering from chronic emphysema, so she was a frequent visitor to the clinic. The first time she brought the old man in, she immediately started flirting shamelessly with Dr. Fraker, so much so that he was afraid he would make some awful mistake and give her grandfather the wrong medication. Dr. Fraker strove to remain professional as he listened to her oblivious grandfather's labored breathing, and she sat there smiling her sweet heartbreaking smile and twisting a glossy strand of hair around her finger, batting those long dark lashes. From that day on, she always made excuses to come by the clinic, to bring him little snacks or fruit juice, and she was fiercely smart, always curious about everything, and asking intuitive and thoughtful questions. In a different world, she would have made an excellent doctor. She called him Dr. Mike, and kept on wondering aloud if he had a girlfriend back in the States. He desperately wanted to ask her out, but he had no idea what one did on a date here in this wild wonderland. She seemed to know everyone in the town and frequented the wilder bars and clubs along the beach, and could probably come up with something, but he kept on finding excuses to put it off and continued pining from a distance. That Saturday morning when she showed up pounding on the door to his little house at 7, her nipples were the last thing on his mind. She was with 2 teenage Tico kids, and one of the boys was holding an infant. "Juicy?" he said, befuddled and sluggish as he fumbled for his glasses. He had not meant to call her that, but it slipped out. "Dr. Mike," Gisela said, "this baby is sick." Okay, he said, hooking his glasses over his ears and peering at the bundle that was held by the taller of the 2 boys. It was wrapped in a beach towel, face covered and squirming forcefully. Dr. Fraker could hear muffled cries. "What's wrong with the baby?" "They don't know," Gisela said. "They tell me they find him like this." Dr. Fraker reached out and pulled back the towel to uncover the infant's face, and then made a barely audible shocked noise. The infant's eyes bulged horribly in their sockets, weeping blood at the corners, and his little head lunged from side to side, spine arching dramatically. He had a rag tied tightly around his mouth. Dr. Frager took the baby and set it down on his kitchen table. "Why is there a rag in his mouth?" he asked, fumbling with the knots, as the agitated baby writhed, squirmed, and threatened to roll off the table. The baby's skin was as hot as an iron skillet. The taller boy said something in Spanish. "He says wants to bite," Gisela translated. "What?" At that moment the rag came off, and the baby's toothless mouth snapped furiously at Dr. Fraker's hand. "Jesus!" Dr. Fraker said, snatching his hand away. The baby's arching and squirming doubled to almost seizure-like intensity. Ask him where he found the baby. Donde?" The boy replied, and Gisela translated. "On a boat." She paused to let him continue. "The boat was on the beach." Again she listened. "There was blood, but nobody was there. Again, nobody but this baby." Dr. Fraker peeled down the towel and examined the chubby little body. It was covered in dry blood, but seemed unharmed except for a rather nasty-looking bite mark on one thigh. The small round bite looked distressingly human. Okay, Dr. Fraker said, running his fingers through his disheveled sandy hair. "We need to get this baby to the clinic right away." At the clinic, Dr. Fraker contacted the hospital in San Jose and made arrangements for the infant to be transported as soon as possible. At first, he had considered the possibility that febrile seizures could be causing the squirming and violent agitation. However, in spite of the high fever, a seizure could not possibly last so long, and the boys who found the baby claimed he had been like this non-stop since they found him. The symptoms were similar to that of rabies. The level of agitation was so extreme, Dr. Fraker had never seen anything like it. And the eyes, the horrible, bloody, bulging eyes. Could there be some kind of cerebral hemorrhage? Some kind of inner pressure that was pushing the eyes from their sockets? He sent one of the boys to gather more information on the empty boat. He was horrified by what he found. The boat apparently belonged to a man and wife named Salvador and Ana Lenore Rojas, who ran fishing tours out to the various islands off the Pacific coast. Their 3 children, Liliana, Jorge, and baby Nando, always rowed out with them. The boat had gone out at dawn with 4 American tourists, 2 older couples from Florida. It returned with only the infant son in this bizarre and inexplicable state. Just the infant and a huge quantity of blood. Dr. Fraker began to feel a slow, creeping kind of dread as he placed the tightly restrained, still agitated infant into an improvised quarantine area in the clinic's back room. The doctor washed his hands. He crouched over the sink, scrubbing and scrubbing until his skin was red and sore. He was haunted by dark visions of Marburg or Ebola or something new. Something new. Some new, impossible virus from the depths of the jungle that had suddenly decided to make the brash and ballsy hop to humans and make itself at home. There were Americans missing, presumed dead. This was going to be a major international incident, and his actions would be scrutinized and reported on by every level of the Costa Rican and American governments. He was terrified, intimidated, and totally out of his league. He pulled down a yellowed sheet of typewritten numbers off the wall by the phone and called the American embassy. Caleb didn't understand what the problem was with Costa Rica. It was like an entire country of potheads. Often nobody bothered to do anything, build anything, or fix anything. The roads were horrendous, secondary airstrips primitive at best. Lucky for the wildlife, not so lucky for a Type A television producer that needed to get the hell out of San Jose. Caleb maintained constant contact with Alan via satellite phone while shouting at the unflappable TICO officials, whose job seemed to consist of nothing more than smiling and being in his way. He was eventually able to bull and bribe his way out to the coast, where he had a boat and a team of bad men to find Jason and help figure out what the hell went wrong. Gerda's sultry voice came on the line while Caleb was loading his brand spanking new Cigarms Granite 45. "I have a Mr. David Towdridge on the line, sir." "Who?" Caleb slapped the clip in the grip and frowned. "Towdridge?" A reedy voice spoke up. "I understand you have yourself a situation out on Isla Negra." "It's handled," Caleb responded. "Who is this again?" "David Towdridge, charge d'affaires, U.S. Embassy." "Well, ambassador," Caleb began, trying to pull something reassuring out of his deep-fried brain. "Charge d'affaires," the man replied. "The ambassador is currently in Idaho, attending a university summit on agricultural exchange." "Right," Caleb said, refusing to be flummoxed or caught off guard. "I can assure you, there is no cause for any official concern on the part of the embassy." I'm afraid I'm going to have to disagree rather vehemently with you on that point, Mr. Carson," Talridge said. "I am a person concerned about the outbreak of what appears to be an unknown disease of a rather dire nature that was recently witnessed on your," he paused, "television program." He said the words television program like he would have said clogged toilet or radioactive waste. Caleb bristled. "Look," he said, putting on his big Hollywood honcho talking to backwoods hick tone, "I'm going to let you in on a piece of television magic, but you have to promise to keep our little secret. Obviously, I'm flattered that you were so impressed with the special digital effects and our makeup techniques used on the show. We wanted to go for a realistic look, and apparently it worked almost too well. But I promise you, it's all a lot of latex and corn syrup." Silence for a moment on the line, and Caleb feared the connection had been broken. Then the man on the other end spoke up, and Caleb felt a cold, slick fist of dread closing around his heart. "At 12 minutes past 6 this morning, a boat washed up on the beach in Quepos, north of Manuel Antonio National Park," Towridge said. "The boat's owners, 2 of their children, and the 4 American tourists who chartered that boat less than an hour before were nowhere to be found. The only apparent survivor is a 7-month-old infant. The infant appears to be infected with the mysterious virus, whose symptoms are similar in nature to those displayed by the contestants on your show." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Caleb replied, struggling not to panic. What the hell was going on out there? "There is no virus on my island. Only paid actors, Mr. Towridge." "Well, Mr. Carson, that is really beside the point. I have been asked to request that the filming of your television show be stopped immediately and that you cooperate fully with the government officials that have been sent to identify and quarantine the virus before it is allowed to spread." "You are out of your mind," Caleb said. "Do you have any idea how many millions of dollars are riding on this season? There is absolutely no way that I'm going to shut down this game show. No exceptions." "I'm afraid you have no choice, Mr. Carson," Towridge said. "Boss, the captain of his boat called. "We got a problem." There was a ring of military ships surrounding Isla Negra. "Ah, fuck," Caleb said. Chapter 17. Alex hadn't woken up feeling so stiff since her first days of training with Mark. The skin on her ass, thighs, and back was pink and corrugated from the rough bark of the tree, and there were bugs tangled in her hair. The sun could not have been up for long, and it was already brutally hot and steam bath humid. In spite of the heat, she would have sold her soul for a pair of pants. The skimpy and useless thong was not much better than being naked, and her torn and knotted rag of a t-shirt was barely up to the job of covering the absolute legal minimum of her oversized breasts. She felt like the She-Hulk, someone's adolescent jack-off fantasy of a sweaty, muscular woman busting out of her clothes. Though, if this was someone's sex fantasy, her hair would probably be clean, and she would not quite be so desperately in need of a shower, deodorant, and a toothbrush. Even as weary, sore, and bone-deep exhausted as she was, she hadn't really been able to sleep, and had only drifted off in fits and starts. Besides, the truth was that sleeping was no better than waking, worse even. She had been plagued by nightmare images of the white-suited men lurching up out of the water, with their bulging bloody eyes and jagged broken teeth. The four of them had taken turns keeping watch. Alex had only been able to let herself doze when Butch was awake and on guard. She did not trust that Val woman, and the Mexican guy was an unknown quantity. She found herself regretting her paranoia. She was close to hallucinating from exhaustion. Everything seemed too bright, obnoxiously over-detailed. The rustling leaves, the tangled vines, the weird spidery orchids. Birds of every conceivable color and then some. There were raucous, hooting monkeys that were less than thrilled about the presence of these large, hairless, non-native primates in what they viewed as had trespassed in their own territory. Alex was afraid they were going to start flinging poop at her at any moment. "Good morning," Butch said when he saw Alex stirring and shaking out the kinks in her knotted neck and shoulders. "Good?" Alex said, picking ants from her hair. "I wouldn't go so far as to call it a good morning." "Good as it's going to get," Val said. "You're alive, ain't you?" She slashed a vine beside her head and held it over her mouth, drinking from the gush of liquid inside, and being careful not to let the slender stem touch her lips. "Alive for now, anyway," the Mexican guy said, running a hand over his stubby head, and then crossing himself and kissing the back of his thumb. "So?" Val said, squatting, straddling two sturdy branches. "Plans, anyone?" To Alex's amazement, Val pulled the crotch of her filthy shorts to one side and pissed down onto the ground. Alex looked away, out across the leafy canopy. When she looked back, the Mexican guy was pissing down onto the ground beside Val, with a big smile on his face. "Don't get any ideas, Pablo," Val said, smoothing her shorts back over her crotch. "My name is Beto Guerra," he replied, shaking off the last drops and tucking his tattooed dick back into his shorts. "But you can call me El Chaludo." "Look, we need to get the hell off this island," Butch said. "That's critical. This place is a death trap. If we stay here, we're as good as dead." "We make a raft," Val said. "We need to figure a way to store fresh water for the trip. But I know we can make it to the mainland." "Right," Beto said. "But what about these fucking camera things? You heard the rules. We leave the island and bam!" He spread his tattooed fingers wide around his face. "Off go our fucking heads, man." "I think I have an idea how to disable these camera rigs," Val said. "It's a matter of bypassing their main cable and tricking it into thinking that it's still connected. Let me do one of yours, and while I'm working, be sure to watch real careful so you can do the same for mine." She reached out towards Butch, and he slid back along the branch, wary. "You're crazy," Butch said. "There's no way I'm letting you blow my head off." Alex's fingers unconsciously traveled over the contours of the headset. She shook her head. "Uh-huh," Alex said. "No way." "What do you say, Chaludo?" Val said with a wild smile. You a gambling man? Beto squinted at her. You really think you can do it? She shrugged. We don't know until we try. Fuck it, Beto said. If we're gonna die anyway. Alex watched anxiously with her heart in her throat as Val scraped her shell knife along the tree trunk, shaving off little curls of bark until she was able to collect a bead of amber sap on the end of the blade. She let the sticky droplet slide down onto the connection between the camera rig and the thick black wire that ran across the power pack on the back of the head. Sweat was pouring off the curve of Beto's scalp. He was trying to keep his stone-cold, badass face, but his eyes were wide, ringed and with white all the way around. Come on, he said. Do it already. Here goes nothing, she said. Beto crossed himself 3 times in quick succession and squeezed his eyes shut. Val cut the wire above the head of Sap. Nothing happened. Did it work? Alex asked. Beto's shaking hands went to his temples. There was a thin, almost tasty smell like burnt maple syrup. The sap is blocking the connection, so the machine can't tell if it's been disconnected, Val said. Butch nodded, squinting at Val and back at Beto. Okay, you win, he said. Get this fucking thing off me. That's when Beto's head exploded. Alex threw her hands over her face, but was too slow to stop the hot gush of blood and head cheese from blinding her. She almost toppled backward off the branch and had to flail her arms wildly to catch her balance. Fuck! Butch yelled. Well, Val said, guess that didn't work. You killed him, you fucking crazy bitch, Butch said. Fuck you, Val replied. I had to try. Alex tried to wipe the blood from her eyes, and when she did, she was sorry she could see again. Beto's mostly headless body was hung up on a branch about 3 feet below them. He had nothing left but a small rag of stubbly scalp hanging from the bony, smoking stub of his neck. All 3 of them were splattered with blood, brains, and sharp flecks of bone. Val and Butch looked about ready to start swinging at each other again. All angry teeth and wide eyes in their wet, bloody faces. You fucking killed him, Butch said again. She shrugged. I didn't kill nobody white. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? Butch asked. Are you telling me that the wetback was your bosom butt buddy now that he's dead? Val scowled. You didn't even know him. Look, Butch said, whether we knew him or not, that doesn't mean it's okay to use him like a goddamn lab rat. I didn't see you volunteering, tough guy, Val replied. Okay, Alex said, hands up and trying desperately to defuse the situation. Okay, fine. It didn't work, so we need to come up with some other kind of plan. What plan? Butch asked. There's no fucking plan. The plan is we're trapped here, and we fucking die here. That's the fucking plan. There's always a way, Val said, and I won't give up. Fuck you, Butch said. We're dead. Fuck you both, Alex said, turning away and easing down the trunk of the tree, trying not to slip or to look at the headless remains of Beto on her way down. I'm getting cleaned up. Alex walked away from her companion's useless, spiraling argument and crouched down over a little stream, splashing the water over her sticky face and chest until she felt as clean as she was going to get. She drank a few mouthfuls, trying to ignore the fact that she was starting to get really hungry. Then she froze with one dripping hand halfway to her mouth when she heard a stealthy crackle of footsteps in the foliage behind her. She spun toward the sound and found herself looking down the barrel of a large rifle. Behind the rifle was a camo-clad soldier in a helmet and complex, insectoid gas mask. Are you sick? He asked, his voice muffled behind the mask. Say something. Alex raised her hands, eyes wide. Something! The soldier lowered the rifle and pushed the mask down around his neck. Thank God, he said. I thought you might have been one of them crazy ones. He looked like barely more than a teenager, dark hair and sweet-faced, a little chubby in the cheeks. He spoke with a hint of a southern drawl and was trying to grow a mustache, though not having much luck so far. The name patch above his breast pocket read Devore. He was clearly terrified. Are there... Alex paused and wiped her mouth. Are there more like you, more soldiers? Yeah, the kid said. We was fighting them crazy ones, and I got separated from my squad. We're here with doctors. We came to get everyone off the island to contain this freaky virus that's got everybody all crazy. Everybody's all messed up. He looked back anxiously over his shoulder. Alex could have kissed him. She felt a huge wave of shaky relief wash over her, and she clenched her fist, feeling close to tears. They were saved. Soldiers, order, official people. It was over. Hey, Butch! Val! Alex called. Butch shimmied quickly down the tree with the wary Val close behind him. Soldiers, Alex said. They're here to take us off the island. The fuck they are, Val said, hanging slightly back. Don't trust him. What the hell is your problem, Val? Alex asked. Think about it, girl, Val said, clenching her shell knife tight in one fist. There's an outbreak of a deadly virus on this island. They're here to contain it. How do you contain a virus? You quarantine the area, Butch replied. Nobody goes in or out. That's right, Val said. No, that ain't right, the young soldier said. We're supposed to round up the remaining contestants, get y'all off the island, and contain you safely back on the ship. That's our orders. Don't believe him, Val said. Shush, Butch said. Listen. Val cocked her head. Radio, she said. More soldiers. Alex strained to listen. She thought she heard a faint crackle of static and a low voice reciting numbers between the static. It seemed to be getting louder. It must be my squad, the kid said. You don't know that, Val said. Quiet, everyone, Butch said. I think I see 'em. Through the trees, camouflaged shadows were moving stealthily toward them. Helmeted heads and masked faces could be glimpsed between the branches. It's my guys, the kid said. I can hear the base camp calling Sergeant Colson. He raised his hand. Hey, Sarge! Hey, it's me, Debo! I'm here, over here! Shut up, Val said, but it was too late. The figures froze and heads turned toward the sound of the kid's voice. Alex could make out deep, bloody gashes through their torn clothing, smashed lenses in the gas masks, and those horrible, wide, bulging eyes beneath. Oh, shit, Alex said as the infected soldiers started crashing eagerly toward them. Devo, Butch said between tightly clenched teeth. Look at me. Is that your name, Devo? The kid tore his eyes away from the advancing soldiers and looked at Butch. He nodded. It's Gilbert DeVore, he said, but about everybody calls me Devo except my mom. He looked back at the advancing squad. They were closer, fighting through the tangled underbrush. Listen to me, Devo, Butch said. They're infected. You need to give us weapons or we're all dead. What? The kid turned back to Butch, frowning. You heard him, Val said. We don't have a chance without weapons, Butch said. Hurry. The kid turned wild eyes back to the advancing soldiers as they fought and tore their way through the thick jungle foliage. I can't do that, he said. It's against regulation. Fuck regulation, Butch said, reaching for the sidearm on the kid's hip. I said I can't do that, the kid said, raising the muzzle of his rifle up to Butch's chest, eyes bouncing from Butch to the advancing soldiers and back. Sure you can, kid, Val said. In an instant, she had slipped behind the kid and had the shell knife pressed up under his chin. Shit, the kid said, lowering the barrel of the rifle. The soldiers were almost on them as Butch pulled the kid's handgun from its holster. Val helped herself to a nice survival knife that looked as if it had never been used and tossed the machete from the kid's belt toward Alex. Alex caught the huge knife in time to let out a startled grunt and bury it deep into the reaching arm of one of the infected soldiers. In a moment of mad chaos, it seemed the soldiers were all around them, bloody, clutching hands and huge, crazy eyes, clumps of dirt and leaves sticking to the clothing and the clotting gore and ground into gaping wounds. The soldier with the machete hung up in the thick muscle of his arm was blond and ruddy, bearded with gore. His helmet and gas mask had been knocked off and both hung skewed and tangled down his back. The straps looked like they should have been choking him. They were digging so deeply into his muscular neck, but he didn't seem to notice. She wrenched the machete free from the soldier's arm and kicked him back, heart screaming in her chest. Val and Butch stood close by, nearly back to back, each brandishing their newfound weapon. The young kid was off to one side, looking like panic was about to mow him down like a speeding train. Alex crouched back against the trunk of a tree, watching in horror as violence exploded all around her in lurid nightmare flashes. One of the soldiers was lurching toward the young kid, and a kind of terrified recognition cut through the panic in the kid's face. "Ronnie?" he said, brows knitted. "Ronnie, it's me, Devo. Don't you know me, Ronnie?" Apparently, Ronnie did not know him, because he lunged at the kid with lips skinned back from broken teeth, snarling like a rabid animal. The kid let out a string of terrified curses and pushed the soldier to one side with the muzzle of his rifle. As the soldier staggered and fell, he reached out and clutched at his arm. Shattered, exposed finger bones tore the kid's uniform sleeve and raked long gashes in the flesh of the kid's forearm. He yelped and tumbled away. Alex jumped, startled at the sharp report of a gunshot. She turned to see Butch's firing the kid's sidearm point blank into one of the advancing soldiers' gore-crusted chest. A tall, thin soldier with one arm severed at the elbow did not flinch. No reaction. Butch fired a second shot into the head, and the one-armed soldier staggered a little, seeming more disoriented than hurt by the bullet, but only for a scant second. Then he refocused on Butch and leapt at him. "Fuck!" Butch shouted, and kicked the one-armed soldier in the chest, knocking him back and away. Val was slashing away with the knife, cutting throats and slicing open bellies and thighs, but all to no avail. The soldiers were no more affected by their wounds than the white-suited men or the two contestants from the night before. Not only that, but the thick, suffocating heat seemed to have no effect on them either. It was wearing Val, Butch, Devo, and Alex down fast. "We're fucked," Val called. "Ronnie," the kid was saying. "Fuck, I'm sorry, man." He placed his muddy boot on Ronnie's chest, holding him down as he raised the rifle and put a bullet in his buddy's forehead. The soldier continued to flail and growl, clutching at the leg of the kid's fatigues. Alex was starting to feel shell-shocked, overwhelmed and sluggish, her thoughts disjointed and nonsensical. The heat was exhausting, and she was drenched in sweat and dizzy, spangles fluttering in the corner of her vision. She tried to count the attackers. Were there 4, 5? She was having trouble telling them apart. Another soldier lunged at her, this one masked and unrecognizable. She brought the machete down, slashing at the curve of his helmetless, shaved head. One of the mask straps severed, and the gas mask fell to one side, exposing a single huge eye as fat and red as a peeled plum. He kept coming. She kicked his legs out from under him and leapt back and away, crashing awkwardly into a tree and knocking the wind out of herself. Her heart was slamming against her ribs, and she felt close to passing out. This was hopeless. They were going to die. Then she saw Butch to her left, rolling over and over in the dirt with the crazed and slavering soldier. The soldier was snapping at Butch like a rabid dog, as Butch torqued the guy's arm back until Alex saw it snap against the bend of the elbow. The bone cracked and shattered. A shard pierced up from beneath the skin. The soldier seemed totally unaffected by pain, the broken bone or anything Butch was able to hit him with, and he continued to strain hungrily toward Butch's terrified face. Alex realized that all of Butch's training and fighting skills were completely useless against this onslaught of infected and enraged attackers. She could see that he was tiring. He was on top of the soldier, pressing down on the other man's shoulders and neck. But the gnashing teeth were getting closer and closer to Butch's face. Butch was losing, and with that realization, something snapped inside Alex, shattering her paralysis. She let out a furious shriek and rushed towards Butch with the machete raised high. She brought that huge blade down with all her power across the soldier's wide-open mouth. The top third of the soldier's head lolled backward at the jaw joint, and she brought the machete down again. The top of the head was severed from the lower third and went skittering across the jungle floor. The soldier's body spasmed furiously and then went limp. Butch looked up at her and then shoved the body off to one side and stood. "Thanks," he said. His hands were shaking. "I guess we're even," she said. Whatever he might have said next was lost in a string of gunshots as Devo screamed at the top of his lungs, firing round after round into his buddy's head, until there was nothing left of his skull but a wet red smear in the dirt. "Val!" Butch called. "What?" Val was fighting off 2 soldiers at once. slashing at their faces and kicking them back again and again. She, too, was close to being overwhelmed. "You gotta cut the heads off," Butch said, "or blow them off. That's the only way to stop them." Val nodded. "Right," she said, dodging her current dance partners and slipping around to where Butch and Alex stood. "Butch and I," she was bent forward, sucking wind, "will immobilize the fuckers." Another set of deep breaths. "Alex and Cool Breeze over there." She paused again, swallowing hard and raising the knife as the remaining soldiers turned to attack. "Liberate them from their infected heads. Got it?" Alex nodded. "You hear me, Cool Breeze?" The kid looked up from the mess at his feet, the mess that used to be his friend. "Yeah, right," he said. "So grab a fucking machete," Val said, ducking a lunging shoulder and neatly hamstringing him, kicking him toward the trembling kid. "And get to work." "Jesus," the kid said, looking down at the twitching, flopping man. "Sergeant Coulson, this is totally fucked." "Now you're getting it," Val replied. The kid reached for his dead friend's machete and cut off his commanding officer's head. He stared at the headless body for a few shell-shocked seconds, and then turned away and vomited violently against a tree trunk. Butch had the last infected soldier tied up in a pretzel-like hold, face down in the dirt. "Alex," he called, "do it!" Alex looked away from the vomiting kid and nodded. Hefting the machete, she swung harder this time and was able to separate the head from the body with one blow. It rolled away to bounce off the kid's boot, and when he looked down and saw it, gas mask still attached, he bent over and puked again. "So much for the fucking establishment heroes coming to save our asses," Val said, wiping her knife clean on the fatigues of the headless body that was at her feet. "Get as many machetes as you can. Guns and ammo, too, in case we run into any," she smirked, "conventional enemies." "Right," Butch said, gathering up firearms and stacking them in the center of the bloodbath. "When you're done feeling sorry for yourself, soldier boy," Val said, "how about giving us a hand?" The kid slumped at the base of a tree, head down between his knees and hands over his face. He looked like he was crying. "Devo," Butch said, laying another rifle on the pile. "You okay?" "Fucking pansy ass," Val snorted, pulling a bloody machete from a dead soldier's belt. The kid looked up and his face was pale. Thick beads of sweat stood out on his forehead. "He doesn't look so good," Alex said. "Devo," Butch said again. "What's wrong, buddy?" The kid held his arm out to Butch like a child who wants his daddy to give him a Band-Aid. "It hurts." The scratches across his forearm were puffy and red, oozing dark, sluggish blood. "Jesus," Butch said. "We need to clean that now." The kid sniffled and wiped tears from his eyes. His knuckles came away bloody. "Holy shit," Val said. What is it?" Devo asked, wiping his eyes again. Tears of blood were rolling down his pale cheeks. "He's infected," Val said. "Look at his eyes." I am not. I swear I'm not," the kid said, but there was a shaky note of panic in his voice. "He is," Val said, grabbing a handgun from the pile and thumbing off the safety. "Get back, Butch. Don't make me shoot you both." Don't let her kill me, please. Butch, please," the kid begged, hands up in surrender. "I'm okay, really. I got some blood in my eye." "Drop your weapon," a deep, authoritative voice called out. Val spun toward the voice and met a brace of soldiers. Normal soldiers, masks on and guns aimed at Val's head. "Damn it," Val said, lowering the gun. "He's infected. Look at him. We need to cut off his head before he freaks out and attacks us." "Fuck that," Devo said. "I'm fine. She's crazy, man." "Tell him," Val said helplessly, gesturing towards Butch and Alex. "He got scratched," Butch said. "Not bit." "It's not in the saliva. It's in the blood," Val said. "Like fucking AIDS. And you get their blood in an open wound." "What's your name, soldier?" asked the deep voice. "Devore, sir." "Private Mitchell," the deep voice man said. "Tend to Private Devore's wound. Get it cleaned and bandaged." "Yes, sir," one of the other masked soldiers replied. "Private Shercombe. Private Catalano," the deep-voiced man continued. A third and a fourth soldier stepped forward, responding in unison like twins. Yes, sir? Take the contestants into custody. Ah, shit, Val said. The soldiers handcuffed Val first, then Butch, and Alex last. Yay, soldiers, Val said in a high, facetious tone. Head tilted toward Alex. Hooray, we're saved. Shut up, Butch said. Sarge, the grunt leaning over Devo called. What is it, Mitchell? The deep-voiced man replied. I think... That was all that the soldier was able to say, before Devo lunged at him and locked his teeth onto the soldier's wrist. Devo's eyes were huge, swollen, bloody in their sockets and rolling madly. Fuck! The soldier yelped. Get him off me, man! Val made a swift dash to the left. However, from behind, a soldier had caught her by the arm and forced Val to the ground. I told you! Val screamed. I fucking told you! Guns went off all around them in a deafening barrage, and Val hit the dirt. Butch grabbed the back of Alex's shirt and pulled her down with him. Alex pressed her face into the ground and waited to die. Cut their fucking heads off! Val was screaming, and then someone was yanking Alex roughly by her feet and telling her to run, emphasizing their point with the muzzle of a rifle. Alex did what she was told. Okay, this has been chapters 15, 16, and 17 of Friday the 13th, The Jason Strain. And boy, has this book taken like 3 or 4 hard left turns. Like, where's the story going, you know? It's good to see Jason back in the mix, getting to get that guy that thought he took out Jason when it was just the dude wearing a mask. And then Jason got him. That was pretty cool. Jason got himself a new mask. Pretty cool. So much happened tonight. Beto, man, his head just blew up, didn't it? Part of me thinks Val did that on purpose, but I don't think the book's ever going to address that again, so we won't know. However, I did like how the author had somebody say or something that they're all messed up, because if you didn't know, that's a callback to Night of the Living Dead, the 1960 black and white one, 1968. There's a guy being interviewed at the end of the movie, and the actor doing it just improvised the line saying, yeah, they're all messed up. So I feel like the author was doing a callback to that. Perhaps I'm wrong. Anyways, guys, let me know what you thought of tonight's chapters. I'll be back tomorrow with some more. We're getting into the home stretch now, about 150 pages left. So let's see where it goes. Until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian, saying thanks for listening, and have a great night.